when you said the oil thing, like digging
Mm.
for oil, and the product thing, both is like two things popped up because like in my pod from like the by now it's not really going anymore, but like this pod from the sense making one-on-one course, the one that
Oh,
kind of
oh yes,
yeah, that I'm still
yes.
in contact with these people. One of them actually was in academia, and he did his PhD in like she's yeah, geology, right? Yeah, like researching how all these uh yeah, plate tectonics and stuff like that works, which is connected to finding oil. Like that's kind of the most profitable profitable application of that. And he
Yes.
did his PhD work, and he told us that he was kind of disillusioned by academia doing that because he was finding a new way of doing that much more efficiently, and kind of proving that the current official way of doing it is not better than a coin toss, if you do the statistics. And then some professor kind of cryptically, if I understood the story right, it's not 100% clear to me, but I think he was kind of cryptically told like, um, don't go in this direction. We already tried that, it didn't work, but there was no record of that. Like he was exploring something, and then it was clear, so the research that is where a lot of money is hinging upon is the stuff that goes black very quickly. It's being bought by private companies,
Yes,
secret.
yes.
Yeah, and then he figured out that the thing that he discovered was discovered before. He pushed
Right.
the frontier, but it was not the real frontier. And
God.
it's a very interesting dynamic if you now see that at one instance of like a class that is
Yes,
unknowingly big, like
yes, yes,
what is behind
yes.
that
I
veil?
mean, and why are we surprised by that?
Yeah.
There's the force, there's the Moloch or whatever you call it,
Yeah.
pushing it, and that's what happens. Yeah,
Yeah.
obviously, it would be odd if it didn't.
And that's the interesting thing. Like
Yeah,
you probably know like Meditations on Moloch,
yeah,
the
yeah.
article. I actually never fully read it, which is something I probably need to
You're
finish.
like most people. No, I have like you get I get the idea. Of
I asked GPT to give me a summary, so I have a rough summary.
course. Yes.
And it's about like the god of negative competition and stuff like that. But what I find interesting is there's a different way to meditate on Moloch, which is um, just take an example like this, and then just meditate on the implications, you know? Because like the
Oh
thing that is
yes.
very interesting is Moloch is kind of the source of this. Did you watch the Age of Miracles video that I put out? It's kind of about how to overcome Moloch. Um,
Okay.
and I propose like there is Moloch is like the one side of the yin and yang, and the miracle is the other side. Um,
Oh
like
yes.
Moloch is the rational sinkhole of that consumes
Yes.
potential, and miracle is the trans-rational liberating force.
Yeah, I'm
That
sure I have seen that. It's worth watching again, though.
mm.
Okay.
I just brought that up because I wanted to just talk about like talk about the structure being veiled in layers of secrecy, right? That is like every the way the structure grows is based on deception, from my understanding, which is basically no one knows the whole picture. And yeah, like Moloch and the veil of secrecy is kind of like inseparable
Oh, I see.
in the
I
sense
mean,
now in this
I
story.
think
Yeah.
I think the idea of secrecy implies that there is some conspiracy
Hmm.
going on,
Hmm.
whereas it's just cultural evolution. It's just there's a I don't think there's a force or consciousness directing it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I love exactly that point where I think that is there's so much to kind of unpack, and I'm still doing. I'm also like looking at that because I feel there is more to the story, but you can do that more
Yes.
in a unelegant way where it just is noise. But I think there is a very nuanced way of expanding that picture because I think there's very important and meaningful stuff being lost if you focus it's the Eric and Brett Weinstein discussion actually. I came across that at some point. Brett Weinstein was asked like, what's the one thing that he disagrees most with Eric Weinstein, and he says that we have this thing where Brett Weinstein is an evolutionary biologist, so he looks at everything as an
Yeah,
emerging self-organizing system,
yeah,
and he
yeah.
says the corruption is just game theoretical, and it's this kind of impersonal force that is between people and not in people. And Eric Weinstein apparently is almost like morally offended by that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he did the research. He was digging in and he looked into the corruption in academia, and he was talking to people who told him in his face, you know what you do with scientists? You feed them, you breed them, and you slaughter them. And he was unveiling that corruption that very, very much was not located entirely in these people, but was acting through people doing conscious choices. I would like to try, if I may, to weave all of these threads together, because I think
Go,
it's actually one picture we're talking about, and I
go,
think it's
go,
gonna
go.
change everything, and it's not being looked at by the people that like Daniel Schmachtenberger and stuff. I don't think that they're really looking there, and when they will start doing that, oh my God, it's gonna be crazy. But
Okay.
so I'm just gonna do like a rough thing on the Moloch thing, because that's like the dark side of it that is less interesting than the bright side, I think. But just to kind of pick that up, because you were saying it's this the veil of secrecy implies a conspiracy, and I think there is this, you could say, this horizontal Molochean principle, which is kind of like a multipolar trap that is where everybody is looking left and right.
Hmm.
But then there's this vertical component where it's more like people are seeding these traps because they are trapped in a higher order trap. It's basically like if someone starts doing propaganda, some king, let's say, if that is a reasonable thought experiment. At some point, they were kings without propaganda, if that is even reasonable to assume, but let's just say. And then one of them started kind of like telling these manipulating and manipulated stories to their population, and suddenly much more people were signing up for the army than before, and he wins more wars. So suddenly you see he is doing a conspiracy as a as an outgrowth of another multipolar trap that he's trapped in at a higher level, and kind of seeing that we are able
Okay.
to do that, and it only works if no one knows that this story is manipulated into a narrative, because as soon as you see that, it doesn't work, right?
Yeah,
It needs to look like a vision. It needs to look natural. It's like if you use influencers to sell your shit, for example. If it was totally open who got what money from which company, and everything was transparent, it wouldn't really work. It needs to be like,
yeah.
oh, everyone is wearing that thing now. It's a natural cultural evolution, right? And that is, I think, so 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 undervalued in the kind of public conversation of how inorganic everything really is in our society. People underappreciate, because they don't do the thought experiment themselves, how far they could actually go in manipulating people, like vast numbers of people.
Hmm.
For example, um, that we talked about how you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand that money corrupts science, right? It's obvious, and it's actually
Yeah.
not obvious how it wouldn't happen. Like it's very
Yes,
hard to
yes,
solve.
yes.
So it's
Exactly.
and it's like, okay, so you can do like the meditation, and what that means is like stuff goes black, research goes black, um, and vanishes behind some veil of secrecy, and you actually grow up in the public sphere. You first of all don't even know that these veils exist, and then at some point you learn about them. You learn about, oh, there are these walls around me, and there's just sky painted on walls. It's not actual sky. So you didn't even know these walls existed. So the next thing is you have this unknown of what is behind these walls. You have no clue at all how big the world outside the Truman Show actually is. And kind of just meditating on that and then thinking about what could be possible, I think is a very powerful thing to do. like the because that goes into stuff like I've been digging into. So Eric Weinstein has this bit about the his whole story of how why everything is the way it is. And I think it might be updating in real time right now because he's digging into like the UAP stuff. But uh, some years ago it was you have these embedded growth obligations in the institutions. They give rise to sharp elbows versus sharp minds.
Okay.
So
Right.
the people at the top, and Daniel Schwarzenegger confirmed this, they are not geniuses. They
No.
actually, in very important ways, they have to be very mediocre or like very under, uh, uh, what's the word? Bad. They need to be kind of daft, to in some regards, to not really see the damage that they're causing with their sharp
Mm,
elbows. That's what
mm.
Schwarzenegger said. Like system thinkers don't tend to be corrupt Wall Street bankers. They kind of destroy the whole system because they can see the damage.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the sharp elbow wins it, and the sharp elbows are the ones saying you feed, breed, and slaughter scientists, and these are the sharp minds that are being treated like that.
Sorted.
Um,
Yes. Yes.
so you don't need to be a quantum physicist to figure out that quantum computing will change the game. You can just fund people and let them do the work for you, and then they have to give you the device once it's done. Eric Weinstein has this whole bit about the embedded growth obligation, and then kind of how our economic growth stopped. That's why everyone wanted their pies of their slice of the pie to grow. But when the pie stopped growing, then you needed to relatively grow it by taking from
Yes.
others. So this is what he says in 1970 really happened, and since then physics made no fundamental progress. We're still on the fundamental physics basis, have not really moved since 1970 at all. And that's a very interesting thing. And he talks about the gated institutional narrative, how that is being used. Like there's this narrative of what's happening actually right now to humanity that is being authored by the institutions. The population itself can't really talk. And then there's of course the podcast landscape that kind of is undermining that system. But there's this gatekeeping around the official narrative of what's happening. And then he talks about the distributed idea suppression complex that he was fallen prey to, Brett Weinstein was fallen prey to, and Pia Malani, the wife of Eric Weinstein. They all would have gotten Nobel Prizes if the narrative that they grew up in was correct. If really the brightest would get Nobel Prizes and stuff.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the way it worked. They all got kicked out of academia and got buried under character assassinations and stuff like that. So that's like his story about why there is no progress. And I think he is pretty much right, but I can be pretty much certain that he did not expect the severity and the magnitude of what he was talking about with the disk, with the distributed idea suppression complex.
Distributed idea suppression complex.
Yes,
Okay. Okay.
that's like his concept that he kind of put forward, and it's very valuable because it's like a self-organizing thing where that got him, that got his brother, where you basically find something out that uh, is not wanted to be found out, um, and then you're just being buried. So his wife Pia Malani figured some very fundamental thing out about the way we do economic theory, and then it was very obvious, apparently, from the experience that this better model would give more transparency to what was happening in the economy and in the world of finance, which would kind of reveal a lot of corruption. And the people that were benefiting from that corruption didn't want us to have better models and understand
Mm.
better what was going on, because this way they could not do all the shady things that would make them so powerful and so rich. It's very obvious. It's not rocket science. It's just a Moloch, Um, and but the thing is that I kind of started digging into that stuff, and it's really wild when you because it connects to the Galahad area and stuff. There
Okay.
is because there is research, physics research that kind of flips our what I would call not the gated institutional narrative, but the gated institutional mythology, which is even more fundamental, which kind of flips that on its head. For example, causality. So in physics, the current status quo is that you have this Einsteinian light cone, which is like causality is limited to a certain area. Every point can only causally influence another point if they are in the same light cone in space-time, because it can't propagate faster than light. Well, turns out there has been a lot of experiments and a lot of research that all went black that proved faster than light propagation. The thing is, once you do that, everything kind of opens up, because then you're like, how the fuck should this reality even function if we can have these logical paradoxes, like what Galahad talks about, this transcendental agency, where somehow the future influences the past, called retrocausality, and the past kind of influences the future, and it kind of co-arises, and it's very confusing what that implies about the nature of reality. And it asks the question of, okay, if causality is not closing this whole thing, if reality is not causally closed, what is this other thing? What is outside the Einsteinian light cone? What governs this realm? How does it relate to space-time, to the thing inside the light cone, to the causal world? And what is our role in this whole thing? Does it make sense?
Um, yes, but I don't know what level to think about it. Um, are you saying that there's physics experiments that have actually suggested that things can move faster than light?
Yes, apparently. I mean, hadn't had anything in my hand yet, but there is I
Uh,
can tell you that there is definitely interesting research that actually this friend of mine pointed me to, that I was talking about with the oil digging.
mm,
He looked into um, actually cold fusion, which was this big thing of, oh, these scammers, right? Like everyone knows about cold fusion as people that try to fool the world. And I still don't know what was going on. But what I do know is that there were people that did like a statistical analysis of all the accidents people were having in that field. And they showed it was like a few standard deviations away from random, that so many people were having accidents in that field. And and there's a documentary about because that's the thing, like there seems to be this missing link between quantum mechanics and general relativity.
mm.
How quantum gravity, that's kind of the holy grail everyone is looking for. I think I found the guy that found it. If you ever looked into Nassim Haramein, have you ever heard that name?
No.
So he found at least something that can solve so many problems, and it's like hardcore physics. It's not like hand wavy stuff. It's like
Mm,
equations,
mm,
all of
mm,
that stuff, and it is all kind of comes back to these very spiritual facts about how this reality is structured. For
mm.
example, that you go within to find the kingdom of heaven and stuff like that, which is actually because the way he solved quantum gravity is that reality is structured holographically, meaning
Right.
every part implicates the whole, can
Yeah.
zoom in to find the whole, and
Yes.
all of that stuff. And this is just beautiful. And I don't think necessarily that this is the reason why his research is not picked up. Um, the reason is more that also what comes with that is you can only solve quantum gravity if you introduce the 0 point energy field, which the past civilizations have called the ether. Nowadays, that's not really in vogue, so people call it the vacuum and stuff.
Oh, my brother-in-law is working on theories of the ether.
I think we talked about this last time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And but the thing is that that's the same problem with Brad Weinstein. He discovered a very beautiful fact about evolutionary biology, made a very un a very unexpected prediction that turned out to be right about lab mice. But it also implied that all our drug testing is out of tune, that we radically underestimate the damage to tissue and overestimate, and like something is overestimated, something is underestimated. Like,
Right.
and it's like it's not good news for these trillion-dollar industries
Right. Right.
that have done that for
Yes.
decades. So
No.
that's the
No.
reason no one knows about the beautiful science, because it has implications for Moloch.
Right.
And this is like the theme, like this Nassim Haramein stuff. To the like, I don't know if I'm still like digging in, and we will see like what needs to be corrected, but there's definitely one big truth in there. So much of it is just so beautiful. Like it's ridiculously beautiful how it all fits together. Like it's exactly what everyone in physics is looking for. But it also has implications for example, energy generators that tap into the 0 point energy field, which suddenly you have the equations and you can be like, sure, oh, there have to be ways you can tap into that. So all these people that were claiming that there have been technologies like free energy for over 100 years now, and that it's being suppressed and stuff like that, suddenly like, huh, actually it makes sense. Actually, it's exactly the same thing with the guy in geology, a friend of mine, right? It's a
Mm.
different magnitude. It's much more preposterous. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's much more enraging to think about that this could be a possibility, but it's the
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
quality. It's of the same quality. It's just like, oh, an industry would be harmed by that. The people tend not to be very like domesticated mind does not really it's kind of disconnected from the ability to perceive and seek beauty. It's just optimization. How do I win? You know? And if that means withholding this utterly beautiful and liberating technology from
Yes.
the world,
Then
well, so be
obviously
it.
you do that. Yes.
And
That's the
it
individualism.
also just this last bit, because they also what it does is it introduces actually um, so Einstein's field equation don't allow waves to propagate faster than light. That's like the limit to the medium of space-time. But it turns out that I mean everybody knows about non-local kind of entanglement, but that's not really clear how much that is a factor. But it also turns out that there are torsion waves. So space-time can't just only do this, it can also twist like this.
Okay.
And this is also part you can solve the equations with that. Mysteriously, this stuff disappears out of the textbooks, and like someone is apparently keep making sure that people just are Lego framed to not look there. But that stuff can propagate faster than the speed of light. But that flips everything on its head, because suddenly like
Yeah. Yeah.
everything, all these logical paradoxes open up, and it's like before you thought it can't be, right? It's good that nothing propagates faster than light, because everything would collapse if it were possible. But now you're seeing the evidence, like to the degree that you take it seriously. Like I like to go about it liminally. Let's just okay, let's play with the idea. Let's play with the idea that all these people were actually right, that they're telling the truth, and we don't have all these insane people walking around, but actually much more sanity in the world than we thought. Um, and yeah, but then it's like, how does it work? And there, I think the Galahad Eridana stuff is so powerful. And that is like if you find a dimension that is orthogonal to causality, that's like finding cheat codes in a video game, right? Like it's like it changes everything. Like suddenly it's not totally insane to me anymore to think about ways to change the past and stuff like that. I don't know if that's possible, but it's just like this stuff opens up, and it just puts it makes your head spin, you know?
Well, yeah. I mean, I like Kastrup's notion that there is no past, there is no future, there
Mm,
is no time. There is
yeah.
only the present, and that's because the past isn't anywhere.
Mm,
The future is just thoughts, and the
mm,
present has no extension. You know,
mm,